The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing game's been missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, I recently did a video about Nate Robinson and Jake Paul being a disgrace, Jake Paul and Nate Robinson being a farce to boxing, and I still hold true to that. But let me give you guys the alternative viewpoint, because you guys know I can look at a certain situation or a certain topic in boxing through different viewpoints. I feel like it's one of the things that makes me one of the better channels here on YouTube when it comes to boxing and the subject of boxing and talking about it. So a lot of people in the boxing community, myself included, had an issue with this fight, and for good reason. But I think maybe, just maybe, that our anger and our frustrations are not properly being managed, and maybe they're a bit misguided. Maybe boxing fans shouldn't even be mad at Jake Paul, because the reality is this: in order for Jake Paul to be able to wiggle himself into boxing and finesse the boxing business and game for what it is, there had to be that environment, there had to be that structure already in place. You see what I'm saying? All he did was just insert himself into the structure and into the business model that was already in place in the sport of boxing. What we should be really getting mad at as boxing fans, truthfully speaking, we should be getting mad at the administrators of the sport. You know, your sanctioning bodies, your local commissions, promoters, just the people that make the boxing world go round. People that pull the strings and make these events come to light, come to fruition. Because if there were more requirements as far as what a fighter needed to have, and boxing was more of a regulated sport and more of a regulated business, then there wouldn't be an environment where you could just have Jake Paul and KSI walk in and finesse the game for what it's worth, because they have a big following on YouTube. They would actually have to have some sort of merit. They would actually have to have some sort of amateur experience, so that when they go in the ring, they're in the best position to not go in there and get fucked up. And the same goes for Nate Robinson, you know, who got fucked up, you know. So I think as boxing fans, we should be putting more pressure. You know, I'm gonna set up shop. I'm gonna set up shop right here by the water. You know, I'm gonna set up shop right here by the water. You know, South Florida living, South Florida stand up. But look, I feel like our frustrations as boxing fans are a bit misguided, because, you know, I'm gonna say it again: Jake Paul wouldn't be able to come in and box Nate Robinson if there wasn't already that environment to create that. You know, he needed to have that structure or lack of structure in place for that opportunity to even be available. So, you know, we need to get more mad at your local commissions, like, you know, Suleiman, the WBC, because what's happening in boxing is and the great Steve Kim once said this, you know, the great writer Steve Kim, he said, boxing is a business masqueraded as a sport. And this is evidence of it, because in no other sport, right? In no other sport, like in the NBA, I couldn't, if I let's say I just had half of Jake Paul's following on YouTube, I couldn't go to the NBA and say I want to sign a contract and play point guard for the Charlotte Hornets. By the way, shout out to the Hornets, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington. That's my team. But listen, I couldn't just go to the NBA and play for the Charlotte Hornets if I wanted to. I'd have to have gone to, I'd have to have some sort of pedigree that I showed in college, or maybe playing in Europe, overseas. And I'd have to go to the NBA draft combine. And the scouts and the people that administrate these teams and make the big executive decisions for these teams will have to see something in my basketball skill set to want to draft me to their team, to their franchise, so that I can put my skills to the test and try to better the team. You know, that doesn't happen in boxing, because unlike basketball and baseball and hockey and all other sports, you know, there's not that level of organization, and there's not that level of administration within the sport. So I feel like, if anything, if you're truly mad about Jake Paul and Nate Robinson and farces like this, I don't think the wise thing to do, and I was thinking about this too and reading some comments and talking to people, I don't think the wise thing to do is to get mad and shit all over it, because Jake Paul, it's not really Jake Paul's fault. He's just doing what he can do because he's allowed to do it. Because you got to ask yourself the question: what does it take to be like a professional fighter. Doesn't really take anything. You just gotta really have maybe a couple amateur fights, if that. In some cases, no amateur fights. Jake Paul don't have any amateur fights, and you get your boxer's license, and all it really takes is for a local commission, a state commission, for them to say yes, you can get a license, or no, you can't get a license. Any Joe Blow out the street can have the label of being a professional boxer. It doesn't mean they're going to be a top level boxer. It doesn't mean that they'll get to box on TV. It doesn't mean that they'll make any sort of significant money in the sport. But technically, anybody can be a professional boxer, and there lies the problem. There lies the problem. It's not Jake Paul. It's not KSI. It's not Logan Paul's fault. It's the sport's fault. It's the structure of the sport and the lack of structure in the sport that is allowing things like this to happen. So you know what? I mean, I fully expect at some point we're going to see NSYNC versus the Backstreet Boys boxing. Why? Because you can. Because you can. Right? Because they can. You know, it's like anything else in life. Why do you do certain things in life? Because you can. You know, why does the guy who has a badass woman girlfriend in his life cheat on her and have 4 other girls on the side? Because he can. Why do some people have 22 cars in their life? Because they can. Sometimes in life you do what you do not because you want to, or not even because it's right, but because you can. And that's what this Jake Paul, Nate Robinson YouTube vlogger situation reminds me of. You know, hey, they're doing it because they can, because boxing has allowed it. So it is my challenge to everyone watching this video. I'm 6 minutes and 48 seconds in. It's my challenge to everybody in this video to take your frustrations. If you're frustrated about this fight and you hate what it's done to boxing, you hate how it's diluted the sport, use that anger, use that energy in a positive way. Go write a letter to your like Las Vegas or California commissions, the California commission, because this fight was in California. Logan Paul and KSI was in California, and Jake Paul versus Jake Paul versus Gibb was in Miami. So write to the California commission, write to the Florida commission, and tell them like, hey, we don't want to see this shit, and let them know like, hey, you're putting people's lives at risk. And if anything, I doubt this video will do much as far as changing the sport and how it's administrated, but like, if anything, these YouTube vlogger fights, and not even just the YouTube vlogger fights, but some of the fights that we see on TV, where we see blatant mismatches, gross mismatches where, you know, you can tell one guy's clearly better than the other, and the other guy's lives being put in serious jeopardy. I mean, extra jeopardy because of gross mismatches and a prospect wanting to pad his record. So even it's not just a Jake. I don't think this is just about a Jake Paul, Logan Paul, KSI YouTube vlogger thing. This is about boxing in general. Because how many times do we watch cards like in America or the UK where we can see these gross mismatches because the prospect wants to run his record up and create a false image and a false sense of security, you know? We have to start putting pressure on the commissions and the sport to basically put on more competitive matchups. You can allow a mismatch, just make sure the mismatch isn't like, don't put a guy with 75 losses versus a guy who's like 10-0. You know, it's not gonna work like that. It's not a good way to go. And if a guy's been stopped his last 3 or 4 fights, and don't put him in there with like Edgar Berlanga, like, you gotta be very careful with what you allow in the sport, because boxing, the reason this Jake Paul thing has happened is because boxing has created this culture of everything being okay. Everything is permissible. If it makes money, it's good. Everything is permissible, and that's not how it should be. If anything, boxing should be a sport that has more principles than other sports. And I know that's funny to say because the boxing business is one of the most corrupt, dirty, and unregulated businesses in all the world, but it should have more principles than any other sport, because there's so much more on the line in boxing. Your health's at stake. Your life's at stake. You know, someone has to look after these fighters, and right now the way the culture of boxing is, it's like everything is permissible, and it's almost like, it reminds me of the streets, like pimps and hoes. Like the promoters are the pimps, and a lot of these fighters are the hoes, and the promoters tell the fighters, go out there and make me some money, go sell some tickets. And when the fighter can't do that no more, or if he can't do it at all, then there's no association, there's no relationship. It's not about how good the fighter is. It's not about how good he can fight or what he brings to the actual sport. It's only about money, numbers, and things like that. Look at Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade is one of the best, most talented middleweights out there in the world. You can't get a foul nobody. Why? Because you don't move tickets, you don't move numbers. So I'm rambling, but I'm rambling with a purpose. I'm rambling with a purpose as I'm walking the streets of South Florida, the streets of Hollywood, and enjoying this beautiful, 70-degree, 68-degree balmy weather here in South Florida is great. But what Jake Paul did, right? Like what Jake Paul did with Nate Robinson, right? I was talking to a lot of people, and they actually opened my eyes up to it. And they gave me they gave me their viewpoint, and I thought they made some good points. Like, what difference is there between Jake Paul fighting Nate Robinson and Christopher Lovejoy, the heavyweight, going down to Mexico and fighting, cans and bums, 18 of them straight, 19 of them straight, and building up his record and getting ranked in the top 15 in the WBA? What difference is there between that or what Devin Haney did when Devin Haney turned pro and Devin Haney, built his record up in Mexico? Or how is it any different than like when any of your favorite fighters go to Mexico or fight some guys from like Slovenia or France or Belgium who have no chance? There are no hopers, and it's just a fight to get them a win. It's not even a fight that's going to get them quality in-ring experience. It's literally a fight just to get them another win on the record. So, that's the question that I've been challenged with answering. And I honestly, it's a tough one to answer, because there really isn't much of a difference between like what Jake Paul did against Nate Robinson and like fighters going down to the Dominican Republic and fighting some no-hoper for a free win, So I feel like boxing's got to, if we want these spectacles to stop or for them not to happen as often, boxing has to get more responsible with how the sport is regulated and actually have some damn principles. I doubt it will. I doubt the business of boxing will ever have principles, because the business of boxing, going back decades and decades, never had any principles to begin with. But this is just me spitballing and venting about something that I'm very passionate about, because I've got a lot of friends in the fight game. I've got a lot of friends that are fighters, and I really care about them, and I want them to have long, fruitful, not just careers, but long, fruitful lives with their families and their loved ones. And if they got money, because a lot of fighters only retire with money, but if they got money, I want them to be able to enjoy the fruits of their hard-earned labor, because this is a tough sport. Guys have died and bled and gone through more than the average human being will ever know or care to experience to earn the money that they do have. So I just really care about the fighters, and I don't want to see boxing and the integrity of boxing, the sport. I'm not talking about the business. So don't get the business of boxing confused with the sport of boxing. The business of boxing is a dog-eat-dog world. It's a really corrupt industry. But the sport of boxing, what goes on in them four corners of that ring, in that square circle, it's one of the most noble, most amazing, most beautifully brutal, but just like amazing things that any man on this planet, or woman for that matter, can participate in, because such a small, minuscule percentage of the population could go be a fighter. Whoever grew up in their life wanted to be a fighter, Everybody wants to be a basketball player. Everyone wants to be a baseball player. Everybody wants those things at some point. But being a fighter is like, it's something you gotta be born with. You gotta be made to be a fighter. And it's like, it's gotta be ingrained in your motherfucking DNA to be a fighter. You either are or you aren't. And that's what makes fighters special. That's what makes boxing special. What makes boxing special is that it's not a game. You can't play it like baseball. Shout out to those baseball fields over there. You can't play it like baseball. Or basketball, or hockey, or croquet, or lacrosse, or any of these other sports. What makes boxing so beautiful is that it's not a game, that it is real, that there is a certain authenticity that exists in boxing that does not exist in other sports. And because of that, because it's not a game, and because it's not real, I feel like the way boxing is administrated has to tighten up, so that people that participate in the sport, that choose to put their lives on the line, whether they be your top shelf creme de la creme world champions, or like your YouTube vloggers like Jake Paul and Nate Robinson, I just feel like boxing should really tighten up, so that we can avoid any sort of shit shows or deaths, you know, or anything like that, because you know, at the end of the day, you know, no matter what level of boxing it is, these fighters only have themselves, their families, and God. That's all they have. Themselves, their families, and God. And when them lights turn off and the cameras aren't there no more, and people aren't like really, and people really aren't like asking about them or having the names on the top of their tongues, like, they're not gonna have their bills paid by any of the fans. For the most part, they're not gonna have nobody but themselves, God, and their family. So it's important that they get in the sport, get out the sport with as much other faculties as they can as possible, with as much money as possible. And I just feel like boxing gotta tighten up. So that's my rant on the subject. 15 minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know any ideas that you guys think boxing should have as far as like administrating the sport and just making it a better place. Not for the promoters, not for just the people that make the money and the administrators, but for the most important people in the sport, the fighters, the people in the sport that if they didn't exist, there wouldn't be a boxing, there wouldn't be a damn sport. You know, leave your comments down below. Make sure you take the time to subscribe. And like I say in every single one of these videos, you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just Kid from Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys.